Hey everybody, it's Kevin Rute here with Digital Marketing Fast Lane. I'm also joined with my co-host again, Eric Philippou. Hey Eric, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. As you guys can see, people watching the podcast, Eric is still growing his hair out. It's a bet that he placed with himself how long he can grow his hair out for the year without getting a haircut. So we'll
Or
see.
without anyone on the podcast commenting.
Yeah, that's true. We'll be here in December and it's definitely going to be long. All right, Eric, very, very special episode today. It's something that we kind of always just assume people do or know about, at least when we're talking about stuff here. And I think it's probably one of the most important things that you could be doing when you're starting an ad account, when you're starting with a brand, or if you're joining a new job. And of course, this relates to Facebook, but like anything, Eric, this isn't just Facebook specific. This could be for your landing pages. This could be for your Google ads, for your YouTube videos, or again, for product research if you want to make a new product. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be research for your Facebook ads, but really research for your target market or for the market you want to hit, the angles you want to hit, and everything else we're going to talk about. So let me go and share my screen and we're going to go over some questions that we think about and get an idea of how you figure out these answers. And for people listening or watching, if you want the templates, feel free to email me or put a comment below and I'll share this link. Let's jump in right now to the Google Doc. Let's go one by one and think about it. So, Eric, I think you had some notes too, so you can definitely talk about those. I think yours were a little bit concise. We can place them in the bottom if you want. Let's think about insights into your demographic. So, the first thing you want to think about is who is your customer? And this sounds so obvious, but you want to think about, is it a man, female? Is it supplements, dog, cat, right? Very basic, right? So you want to know who's your customer. And then now once you sort of figure that out, you want to be thinking about what attitudes do they have about things in general, right? So for example, let's say a skincare brand, right? A men's skincare. What attitudes do they have? Religious, political, social, economic? Maybe it could be they don't have money or they can afford it or they just don't believe in this product, right? And in washing your face, obviously it's very weird, but there could be stuff like that, right? Social economic, remember, some of these things is about the environment you grow up in. Let's say you're doing a men's skincare brand. A lot of men, they don't talk about skincare, right? So you don't believe that you should do it. So those are some of these beliefs that people have that you should be thinking about. Eric, how do you
Mhm.
think about this question?
That specific example is good. There's a lot of ads for keeps and hymns and these kind of products that address these kind of unspoken things very well.
Mhm.
So those are good examples of attitudes that you can actually capitalize on. So just knowing these attitudes, it is good. And the way they address it is very tactful and very careful. So understanding just these basic things, these attitudes, and who your customer is, it sounds like common sense, but it goes beyond just looking at the customer demographic numbers
Mhm.
in your ads manager or in Google Analytics.
Yeah, it's truly understanding why they would want to buy something or who they are. And a really good example is if you were to write a book about this customer, what would their autobiography be? Hey, my name is Eric. I live here. I like ice cream. I grew up in college. And sort of like that sort of shapes your attitude, right? I grew up with Jenny's ice cream, right? So that's how you would think about it. Sometimes it's great to just sort of write who this person would be and then potentially think about their timeline in life. And that's really
Mhm.
helpful for you. The next question would be, what are their hopes and dreams? For example, let's say you're doing a men's skincare, right? You could say he wants to have great skin. He wants to go out. He wants to have a girlfriend. He wants to get married. He wants to have a house. He wants to impress his boss, right? There's all these dreams that people might have that you should be writing down. And again, with anything here, just write it down. This doesn't mean you're going to use them all, but like Eric said before, we can use it as hooks. Hey, the perfect skincare for you to impress your boss. That means it's a job. So now you can have like a job angle, a work angle, a new job angle, a meeting, or you're going to like an event when people were going out before. There's all these little hooks that you can come from just a word. And this is why it's important to be thinking about hopes and dreams. I think you can sort of just really figure out what someone would want. And again, this ties with Eric, I think, with one of your comments, Life Force 8, where would it apply in that thing?
Mhm. Yeah, the Life Force 8 comment is really it. I like to just look at those emotions first and then back into which of those core emotions is this customer most likely to be feeling based on what our lifestyle is like.
Yep. And then next one, what are their victories and failures? This one, think about again, your target demographic. Have they gone to college? Do they have a job? That's a victory. Have they lost a job? That's a failure. Have they tried a business themselves? That's a victory. Have they raised funding? Think about all these things that they could have done before and accomplished in their life. Do they have a family? Do they have a house? Do they have a car? All these little things are victories and failures for people. And again, just write it down. Next one I would say is, what outside forces do they believe have prevented their best life? For a lot of people, it's where I grew up, right? It's them education, my parents. People sometimes feel their parents hold them back, right? Because they didn't let me go out, didn't let me do this. And again, this outside force is so important because it's very in someone's mind. A lot of people do stuff because based on their childhood. A lot of people want to be
Yeah.
successful because they grew up poor, right? So you can use that in a hook. You know what it feels like to live in a one bedroom apartment with 6 people, because that was myself. That drives me because that's what my life was like. So I don't want to be successful because of that thing. These outside forces, and for me, it's like we weren't given this opportunity, so I'm going to make the best out of it. So that is like an inherent thing that really drives me to do things.
If you watch politicians speak, they use this so much to rally their
Mhm.
constituents. So I mean, look at pretty much any politician speak, and you'll see good examples of this.
A good example is obviously recent election. Obviously, Trump was using drain the swamp. Like, hey, this is why nothing's happening because of these people. And you're like, oh yeah, that's so true. They're preventing me from doing this, right? And this is such a deep thing that people have inside their minds. So you just need to figure out how can you get it from them. We have some examples here, but you want to really listen to what people are saying, and you can go to places that are like forums, for example. When people talk about their problems, you sort of get an idea of who people are. You can go to Reddit. I think Reddit's a great example of people talk about stuff all the time, what's affecting them, the political climate, their environment. I think those comments on Reddit are pretty useful to figure out how people think. And it's like, oh, okay, it's interesting that people think this way. Maybe it's a hook or an angle. It's prejudices.
That was a little dicey.
Yeah,
At least using it in an advertisement.
yeah, yeah.
Using it
So,
in an ad is pretty dicey.
yeah, it's a little hard, but just think about this one.
It could just be anything. Like they don't want to buy a certain class of products, or
Yeah.
they don't believe in a certain group of products.
Yeah, it could be products. It could be only buy organic. They only buy this. You know, that type of stuff that people sometimes think about. Only buy vegan. They only
Yeah.
do this. So all this stuff that prevents somebody from buying. A lot of people only want to buy from companies that are kind of like Tom's, right, where they donate or something like that, right? So they're looking for that
Yeah.
thing.
Another good example, you see it a lot in these mental health apps. There are a lot of people just don't believe in therapy,
Yep.
or they think therapy overall is, overpriced or something. So they have ads that target people who are also interested in therapy, but then they might have ads that say this is not like in-person therapist where they overcharge you. This is a much more affordable version of therapy and much more efficient. They have ways of depositioning themselves from people who would otherwise not buy the bad alternative, whereas other times they have advertisements targeting people who use the bad alternative.
Yep. And this one's important because this sort of sums up to what do they believe. It's sometimes like a lot of these prejudice is from just like not even experience. It's just you make it up in your mind. You make up situations in your mind. Oh, what if this happens and this happens? And you're just like freaking out.
That's actually never happened to me, so I'm pretty good.
You have to fight this, and it's good to call this out in your copy, right? Saying like you
Mhm.
probably think going to a therapist is only for females only, right? Or you think a therapist is only for people that have gone through divorce. No, it's for single people, right? So you
Mhm.
can sort of see how.
Yeah, it'd be for anyone.
Yep.
What was that Michael Phelps ad recently came out? That was a great example.
And that's
It's like
exactly
it's
it.
okay to talk about that kind of stuff if you're whatever.
Yep. Really, for this one is just sum up their core beliefs about life, love, and family. Think about it. How do they think about love, family? Some people care about family values. Some people care about finding a lover. This is so important because these 3 things are what matter most to people, at least 90% of people. And at a different stages in their life, it means something different, right? When you're 18 to 24, you're probably thinking more about life, not really love or family, right? But when you're older, you're probably thinking about love and family and maybe less about life. And you're like, okay, whatever, I'll sacrifice some things to have these two. So you have to think about which one of these 3 is most important for them right now at the current age group, and sort of how do you balance that out? Because you can have all 3, but usually 1 or 2 is more important at a certain age range.
Oh, that was a great point about the different age ranges depending on your customer.
Yeah, it just depends. Next biggest thing, I think most people do this, right, Eric? Other existing solutions, it's they look at competitors essentially. So, what is the market already using? Very obvious. List all your competitors, put them here, save them, and then you can sort of go explore their Facebook ad library. What has their experience been like? And again, Eric, where would you go find this? Amazon?
Yeah, you can look at
Yeah.
Amazon, see what they're purchasing. You could also Instagram hashtags of the trending, the top posts within a certain hashtags are a really good way to look at that.
Yep. Look at comments. Amazon is pretty good. Amazon, Reddit, really the query you want to be thinking about is based on the product. So let's say you have a market, right? You have an item, you can just do these sort of things. Product reviews, product alternatives, right? Sort of see like what people are talking about this stuff. People need to be thinking about where you're getting the reviews from. I'm not sure if you saw this recent thread, Eric, on Twitter, on the DTC Twitter. There's this marketer that worked at one of these big companies. He's just, how come no one's talking about this? Unspoken truth, yeah. All these D2C brands have reviews, but they hide all the negative reviews. And the thing people don't know right now is those review platforms, the founders and the marketers control them. So of course you're going to show your
Yeah.
great reviews. You're never going to show the negative reviews. So this is why sometimes researching using a D2C brand is not great, because they're not showing you the proper reviews. They're hiding them.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
want to be going to like other platforms like Trustpilot potentially, or even Amazon. I know people say go to reviews because it's the best source, but it's becoming so gamed that they're not even worth even sometimes looking at, because you're not getting the truth, because a lot of them are getting hidden by the founders, especially in almost every Shopify D2C store. Trust me, like we work with a lot of brands. Eric, you work with brands, you see the reviews in their back end, you're like, oh, okay, it's interesting how this isn't approved, right? Like,
Yeah. Or it's a brand that just made the Shopify site 3 days ago, but they somehow have 10,000 reviews. Half of them are in Russian. And it's just like, okay.
yeah. Of course, you're looking to find reviews. I would say still go to Amazon, still go to Walmart, still go to Chewy. Kind of Eric, like those big players that I don't think there's anything in them for them to keep hiding negative ones. They want to show the real stuff, because the good product surface to the top. That means more customers will come back. So check the big sites. Honestly, be skeptical about those D2C brands. I know for a fact a lot of them are hiding from experience and just talking to the people and just seeing it with my own eyes. Anyways, that's a quick rant. What does the market like about existing solutions? So talk about what are the benefits of it. Going back to reviews, talk about the positive stuff. Look at the positive reviews, look at the positive images. Eric, I think you mentioned a good one too is to look at the hashtags on Instagram. Because if you see people posting photos of the product or service, that means they like something about it. So maybe analyze the image, analyze the comment that the person wrote. Oh, I really love Stacy for doing my bed. So okay, cool. People maybe care about great bed, right? So think about it like that. What does the market dislike about existing solutions? Again, look at the negative reviews. This was a good one. Are there horror stories about existing solutions? Horror stories doesn't mean necessarily mean bad review. It's essentially like a really, really bad review. Did someone get burned? Did someone get stolen something, right? These are like these
Like a
emotional,
news story.
yeah, emotional stories, right? For example, Eric, obviously, have a cleaning company, right? There was a story about this maid company in New York City here, not mine, that got drunk on the job, and then they found her passed out in the apartment, and it made the local news networks. For us, as like my maid company, I was like, oh my god, good thing that didn't happen to us. But that's horror stories that sometimes people read, and then it goes back to actually don't trust maids. So you see how now you have this prejudice against a cleaning service. It's like, oh, it's scary, they're going to come in, they're going to be drunk. So this is kind of why, Eric, I think we mentioned it before, you need to be thinking about what your prospect, your customer is reading. I think going back to before, list down maybe some of the newspapers or places they're getting news from, because they're going to be reading this stuff, and then you should sort of appeal to the market and see what they're kind of noticing there.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, does the market believe existing solution works? I think this is probably the most important one. Most prospects, most people have probably used the product before, and do they need to know, does it work or does it not work? And if it works, why do they think it works? And if it doesn't work, why don't they think it works? Some of these questions you can sort of answer when you're doing a research for another one, but I think this is so key, because if they don't believe a solution works, then you can use as a depositioning of another brand, right? Eric, you talk about depositioning all the time in some stuff. We know you've tried Tylenol, but we developed a new aspirin that now works faster, or is actually not a generic anymore, right? Because Tylenol is a generic. It's like, hey, look, you can't find it in CVS or Walmart, wherever. Making that up. Next one, curiosity. Has someone tried to solve the pain points in a very unique way? And I think this is where you need to be thinking about, is your solution this unique way? Or has someone else come up with a newer, unique way? Right. I think, Eric, from that book that we read, remember when cigarettes came out and then like they were kind of banned, and then like someone came up with a filter, right? And then they're like double filtered, methyl filter, concept of unique mechanisms in the same product, right?
To the point where the rest of the market catches on. You want to see those trends.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was in breakthrough advertising.
Yeah. After a certain while, the market's like, this thing is bad. Oh, well, let's add a filter to make it good. The next unique way was let's add a double filter. Unique ways on top of unique ways after a while. But the first brand, I forgot who it was, they came out with a filter, probably made a lot of money that first year. And then you eventually you saturate and then you have to come up again and rethink of something. So again, what was the result? So think about it. People really like that type of stuff. So think about your product, what you have, what's a unique way that you can solve this product. And it doesn't need to be revolutionary. I think sometimes people think unique means I gotta reinvent the wheel, right? No, it's just a little twist on something, right? So is there a conspiracy theory behind why old solutions didn't work? I think this one's more like you find this in research. What are the stories behind some of the products? Why doesn't it work? Why do people believe it doesn't work? For example, it also doesn't need to be a negative, right, Eric? It could be conspiracy theory things like ancient Chinese medicine is really great for you. You hear that all the time. So you see, Eric, sometimes marketers talk about, hey, look, this ancient Chinese way of solving your cough, 10 leaves or
Mm.
something. It doesn't need to be a negative, it could be a positive.
The medicine is a great example, or health food, like, oh, this is an ancient grain from
Yep.
10,000 years, or I think the quinoa or something. This is stuff people have been using for thousands of years. So it
Yep.
must be good.
Like when acai came out, right? That was like the number one way. Like
Yeah, that was the one, I think.
yeah, the Amazons like been using this for years. Finally, we got it, and we finally were able to like extract it out of like the forest in Amazon. It's like all this crazy conspiracy about why we couldn't import it, right? Another thing too, conspiracy theories.
Politicians like to, they're like these narratives. They might be based on false premises, but they're very emotional, and a lot of people believe them.
Yeah, and I think conspiracy theories are really good because they're very emotional driven and they're not rational, but for the person reading them, it's rational. You see like a strong emotion. It's like, how do you tap into that? They believe that or don't believe that. It's that thing. So someone comes up with like a nice theory about why you can't enter Area 51, right? What was that? When was that storm Area 51? Remember that thing?
Yeah,
That's like a
yeah.
yeah.
So there's a couple things I just want to clarify here. We're not saying put Storm Area 51 in your ads or like conspiracy theories in your ads. We're saying find some kind of like extremely commonly held belief, no matter whether or not it's based in logic, and use that in your ads. Like the Michael Phelps, it's okay to want to get help, or like the Headspace ad, the therapy ad, like things like that. There's like some commonly held belief that it's not cool to get a therapist or something, or you're weird if you get one or something, or even like the Keeps and the Hims brands. It's weird to want to get hair loss treatments or ED treatment. But these brands, they push against that in ways that they kind of make these uncomfortable things cool. The Keeps, the Hims, I think Hims especially does this well because their branding is really cool. Manscaped is probably the best example, actually. They use a lot of humor and stuff. There's a lot of those things. And I guess my second point is to give you an idea of how powerful conspiracies are in general. There's like a saying in media, like facts don't care about your feelings. You see that
Yeah.
a lot. These social media, people smugly saying that. But the reality in advertising is feelings don't care about your facts.
Yep.
And that's a very important point. Very more powerful emotional ad will go a lot farther than if you put stats next to each other.
Yep. And I think another good example, at least I was thinking when we were talking, Eric, is going back to the therapy with Michael Phelps. A lot of people sometimes see articles about someone's rich and they don't have problems at home or they don't have problems. Like people sometimes think that money solves everything. So that's a conspiracy. Like, hey, if I was wealthier, I would be happier. And that's not necessarily true because you see some of these athletes have tons of money and they're not happy. You see this a lot too when players negotiate contracts to get paid like 1 million versus 2 million. And people in comments like, oh my God, you should be grateful for that. It's like a weird belief that people have because if you were in a situation, you wouldn't be like, yeah, okay, cool. Let me just take 1 million. And it changes once that dynamic changes for yourself. So you want to get them to that next level. I think the modern conspiracy theories are kind of like memes.
I think we're also using the phrase conspiracy theory as a blanket term for something that people believe and they don't know what the facts are behind it.
Yeah. But that's a lot of advertising for most people. And so another one is, are there any older attempts to solve this problem that are unique? This is something that you need to research and think about, right? So foot fungus, that's a big one. There's actually a lot of older solutions to solve this foot fungus. And you can look at why they was used or were not used and sort of maybe why it's not brought to market again. So that's something to be thinking about is, again, a lot of times these solutions are interesting because, Eric, I think the military back in the 1960s, pre-1960s, had a lot of these solutions because soldiers went to war, soldiers were fighting these like rough environments, so they were getting sick, especially for the medical space. They're getting sick, they're freezing, they're cold. The military angle also works great because if it's military, it must be good, right? So that's another thing that people sometimes believe.
A military grade strategy.
Like military
Oh,
grade
okay.
knife, right? Military grade. It's like, even though it's like
Oh,
a
yeah.
pocket knife, right? Military grade insurance, stuff like that. So
Wow, what's that?
that's something like that. Right? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Just add it and test it out. Let me know.
Sure.
Think about what happened. Was it a successful product or were they a failure? And again, too, sometimes these products that came out, maybe 1960s, they could have been a failure because it just production didn't make sense at that time. There was no economics of scale. There was no online market, right? It's very word to mouth. And when you're thinking about this, think about why it worked, why it didn't work, or just sort of maybe if it exists anymore. Again, going back to ad copy, saying, "Hey, you probably heard about Kevin's cream. It was used in 1950s wars. How come we're living in the 2020s, but it's not in stock anymore? It's not in stock anymore because the government doesn't want you to have it anymore." Now we've actually been able to contact the scientists from there and tell them to reformulate again in a better solution. And this is what we came up with. So you sort of like tie the stories together. And again, here's some resources that you should probably think about: Amazon, Reddit, Google, of course, is your best friend, and then just forums. You want to go to places where people can just share their thoughts very freely in an unstructured way. And then your job as a marketer or founder is to sort of structure these comments into a template that we just have here. That way you can distill it and then the copy kind of writes itself. Eric, any other thoughts here on Facebook ads research?
I think this all makes a lot of sense. This is a lot of stuff I do too. I kind of have a condensed version of it. Process takes me about 60 seconds if I know the product already quite well,
Mhm.
which, in my case, I do most of the time because I just work on a brand. Basically, the first question is just what's the mass desire that creates this market? What is that life force 8 core human emotion driving this purchase? Could be a couple, could be two, three, could be a couple emotions. But what are they? Those are the emotions you want to tap into in an advertisement. The second is how much do people know today about the way your product satisfies that desire?
Mhm.
Like if it's a completely innovative product they haven't seen before, something like Magic Spoon cereal, that's their state of awareness. They might not be aware that there's a keto cereal. But if it's something like Dr. Squatch soap, it's just a cool soap. I don't want to misspeak for Dr. Squatch, but it is soap. There are a lot of products similar to it. So those are different states of awareness. And then how many other products have you been presented with before yours, or have the audience been presented with before yours? This is the state of sophistication. So again, using Magic Spoon versus Dr. Squatch, Magic Spoon, people haven't seen a lot of keto cereals, but people have seen a lot of like cool soaps come out in the last 10 years or so. So that impacts a lot how you advertise. So you know their emotion and you know how familiar they are with the general concept of what you sell. In Magic Spoon's example, it's a new thing. A lot of their ads are just simple, like this is a picture of the cereal and it's a low carb, high protein cereal. That's a keto friendly cereal. Boom. That's all they need to do to show because their offer's so unique. Or Shapermint, I guess we talk about a lot. They just show that product being used. You never really see a lot of things work that well like that, especially marketed in a cool way. As opposed to, let's say, Dr. Squatch soap, it's just soap. So they have that, I guess, that famous advertising actor doing very theatrical, funny stuff with the soap and the product. They have to go a little more
Above and beyond.
theatrical and out there and wild and get a little more quote unquote creative. These three questions change a lot of what kind of style of the ad you're going to go with and kind of the angle, the context of that the ad's going to be in.
Yeah, I think probably the most important one, at least for me, it's like the state of sophistication, like how
Mm,
much they know about the existing product or solution in this
yeah.
market. There's some brands out there that are brand new and very unique, which is great. It's just very, very hard to succeed. And a good example of this is probably Tesla. Tesla
Mm,
now is successful, but think about 5, 6 years ago when Elon almost went bankrupt trying to create this thing. And people don't talk about it now because it's kind of like they forgot about it. But if you look at the old history, no one believed in this because it was almost impossible. It just didn't make sense. And when you don't make sense,
yeah.
like you have very little supporters. Now, I wish there was like some sort of graph that shows like supporters versus non-supporters, and you probably see supporters just spike up, right?
Mhm.
So it's just so important for brands to understand is when the sophistication of the market is so low or brand new, you have to spend money to educate the market. And educating the market means you're not going to almost make money never. But then once it sort of takes off, you kind of can go and captivate the whole market and own it. That's how you guys should do Facebook ads research. And once you sort of have your notes, save it somewhere. You can use Notion, you can use Google Docs. It's very great to just sort of refresh on some of these stuff every few months when you're working with a brand because the research does get stale. The market could change again, depending on the world, depending on how things change, depending on new competitors coming up. So think about new companies all the time.
You want to do this frequently because you might be a different marketer than you were 3, 6, 18 months ago when you last did this. So you think differently. You have 3 months more of data, which is a lifetime in digital. So you definitely want to do these things very frequently. I do these things once a week for my brand.
Yeah, I mean, Eric spends 240 seconds a month researching. So, so, so that's how much research he does.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not the 60-second process, but you know what I mean. Yeah, yeah. It's just,
Trolling you. 240 seconds a month, guys. That's all you need to do.
I'll bill you
But
for my time.
yeah. But guys, thanks for watching. I really like doing this episode. I think Eric, we need to do more of these like how-to type of things. So just
Sure.
worth thinking about. All right, guys. Any questions or comments? Feel free to leave it below on YouTube. And again, if you guys want this sheet, feel free to email me or post a comment below. Like and subscribe.